Mary, she knows. She knows that you will not always have me. And she is preparing me for my burial. I didn't know it at the time. John took me in his confidence later on and told me that Judas used to steal money from the common purse among the disciples. He used to take it for his own use, for his own good. So he took this money from the common purse that they all put money into. He stole it. And, of course, we didn't know it at the time, but Judas betrayed him. Judas gave him up for just a few coins of silver. And they came and they took him. They arrested him. And a day later, he was put to death on the cross. We didn't know it at the time, but Judas was the one. He was the one that was stealing money, and he was the one that led them to Jesus, that gave him up to die. But that night, Jesus, he knew that my heart was in the right place and I had done what I felt was fitting for someone that would die. I took the nard, I took it and put it on his feet and prepared him for his burial after his death. He realized that. And he knew that we would always have the poor and we needed to care for them. But we had him with us that one moment. That one moment in time, he was there with us. So I took the nard and I cleansed his feet. The smell mixed. It was an expensive perfume and a very strong one. And the smell just went through all the house, all over the place. We could smell the perfume, and it mixed with the smell of the bread that Mary was baking. It mixed with the smell of the farm animals outside. It mixed with the smell of flowers blooming outside the window. And the smell of the stew that Mary had cooking on the stove to serve with the bread later on that evening. But you could smell the perfume above everything else. It filled the whole house with a sweet fragrance. I knew what was to come. I knew his death was to come. I just didn't know that it would be within a few days. And when Judas said that, I was ashamed that I had spent so much money. But Jesus rebuked him and said, "She's preparing me for my death." Some of them were shocked. They didn't believe that it could be so. They didn't think he was going to die. Even his disciples doubted him, and they tried to get him to go away from Jerusalem, but he said, "No, this is where I am to be." And he went on. Just a few days later, he went on to Jerusalem. I still have this bottle. I can smell just a bit of that perfume left. The remains of it. It reminds me of that night. It reminds me of the pain I felt when he was arrested. It reminds me of that heartache I have when he died. But it also reminds me of another thing. Afterwards, Jesus came back to us. It was 3 short days later, he came back to us. And he was alive again. It's a miracle. He had told us one day he would return. And indeed he did. He came back to us, but only for a short time. He told us of the importance of telling others, letting them know of life that we have. He reminded us of the importance of caring for one another, of loving one another and loving God, even with the most extravagant love. His own love for us, he paid the dearest cost of all, his life. This perfume, it reminds me of that night, of the days to follow, and of now, the life we have in him, and the importance for us to live and love extravagantly for others. In some ways, I guess people would see that my act was somewhat of a prophetic one. Prophetic act, putting perfume on him, preparing him for what was to come. But for me, it was sharing my love for him. That great love that I had for him, and remembering the great love he had for each one of us. I can still smell it, and I can still remember that extravagant love.